welcome a few people if you'll allow me. Just give me a moment, technology. So I would like to officially welcome the EU ambassador, the French ambassador, the Spanish ambassador, the Portuguese ambassador, and representatives from the British High Commission, the US Embassy Windhoek, and German Embassy Windhoek, as well as the president of the official opposition party, Dr. Aitula, and leading members of government, members of civil society, members of business community, media, guests. All protocols are observed? Yes? Okay, great. This event is proudly funded by the Hans Seidel Foundation, Namibia, and is in collaboration with the Economic Association of Namibia, EAN, with the support of the Namibian and Desert FM, who are live streaming this event. A very warm welcome to our audience online. Just to run through today's program, we will start off with a presentation for 50 minutes by Mr. Robin Sherborne. We will have a 45-minute Q&A, a vote of thanks by Dr. Clemens von Dordreer, as well as a closing and refreshments at the end. If you have questions or comments, please keep them brief. I would like to be at home by 8:30. Is that a deal? So you each, I think, received the feedback form, yes? So if you can write your questions at the back there, that would really be great. And if you could fill it out in front for me, that would make my life way easier. So we'll start off by calling Mr. Robin Sherborne to the begin. Where is he? Oh, there he is.
Thanks, Marta. Yes, I did turn up. I even came early. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Yes, I look forward to this annual State of the Nation, State of the Economy, National Economy presentation, because it allows me to do a lot of interesting thinking and put material together that I've collected in the course of the year. And it gives me even more pleasure to share that material with more people. I'm really glad to see not only very distinguished politicians and ambassadors here, which is always great, but to see a lot of young Namibians too. Ever since I came to this country, I've been trying to share knowledge about the economy with as many people as possible, but especially the young people of this country, in the belief that the more people know and understand what's going on in their economy. Is there something wrong with the mic? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine by me. It just blocks my face then. Yeah, in the belief that the more people understand what's going on around them, and the more informed they are, the more informed they are when they come to vote, and the more informed they are when they come to hear their politicians talk about the economy and make decisions on their behalf on the economy. So that's my belief. I have absolutely no data to back that belief up, I have to say. So here I am, sort of 35 years later, still doing what I pretty much did at the beginning, and hoping that it makes some sort of a difference. But I enjoy doing it, and I think possibly for me that's the main thing. So you guys can, you can sit and listen. I hope you find it interesting. I certainly do find it interesting. I find it endlessly interesting. In fact, I said at a presentation recently, the Namibian economy is like this mysterious, beautiful woman. You're in love with her, but you don't quite understand her. You're never quite sure what her next move will be, what's really going on in her mind. But that's what keeps you fascinated over the years. If you understood everything, it wouldn't be as interesting. I also gave a presentation last week at the Namibia Oil and Gas Conference, in which I compressed my entire knowledge of the oil and gas industry into, 2 PowerPoint slides. I got a lot of feedback on that presentation, but primarily because I'd compressed it into 2 PowerPoint slides, which people thought was quite impressive. Now, you're not getting away with that today, I'm afraid. We're locking the doors. You're going to sit through an hour of me talking and going through, I think, 40 PowerPoint slides, each of which I find totally fascinating. But if I see anyone yawning or starting to fall asleep, I'll certainly address them and ask them to answer questions about what I've just said. So you are warned. Okay, before I kick off, I would like to say a big thank you to the Economics Association of Namibia, to the Hunt Seidel Foundation, and to the IPPR. I feel enormously privileged to be able to give a talk like this every year, and it's thanks to them that I'm able to do so. I think we need more of such events, not just talking shops, but events that are based on data, on analysis, on research, and hard-nosed economic thinking. There are a lot of events taking place in this country. I've been to quite a few of them where a lot of warm words are expressed, but there's not a lot of meat in terms of economic substance. And that's what I can promise you today, I think, meat. And I know most Namibians love meat, so you're going to love what I have to offer. It's a real 550-gram medium rare steak that you're going to get your teeth into. The other thank you I'd like to say is to Namibia. I came to this country in 1991 from the UK. You can see I've still got the British accent. But Namibia has been very good to me, and I'm very grateful to the country. And, it's allowed me as a bit of an economic dabbler. I failed in physics. That was my first career. I'm now in at least my second career in economics. It's allowed me to try and apply economics to a very wide range of issues. And that has kept me interested over the last 35 years. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to do that. And I'm very thankful for the latitude that Namibians give me to do that. I've always felt I can speak my mind based on the research I've done. No one's ever tried to shut me up. Okay, I've had a few insults now and again, but that's natural. But I really believe, this was our motto at IPPR when Christy Kilder and I started it, that development is best promoted through the free exchange of ideas based on research, essentially. And I still very much believe that. So what I have to say today might sound very critical to some ears, but it's said with the best of intentions, I'd say. I only want to see this country succeed and succeed economically. I don't think I have any particular axes to grind. You might be able to point out a few, but I'm not in the pockets of the oil and gas companies. I'm not working for government. In fact, I'm completely unemployable. I haven't had a proper job now for some years. I'm freelance because I do struggle to keep down a job because I'm always thinking about the economy and expressing what I feel about the economy, and that doesn't always go down well. So here I am, alone again after 35 years, just me and the Namibian economy. But I'm quite happy about it. And I hope you will be too. I hope you feel that I've got something positive to add. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say at the beginning. I'm not a great one for protocol. I think Marta's done that very ably. So I'm going to kick off, but I'm going to kick off with a quick commercial break, if that's all right. Okay. Because I want to show you something. Where is it? Here. Can you all see that? So some of you might know that I'm the author of the Guide to the Namibian Economy. Yes, the last edition was 700 pages. It has all sorts of multi-uses. You can use it as an offensive weapon, as a defensive weapon, as a paper stop, as a doorstop, and you can even read it and learn about the economy in it, which is great. I don't think I've met anyone, apart from Graham Hopwood, who's read the entire book, because Graham had to edit it. That was the only reason he read it. But there is an awful lot of information in there. And I think the thinking was, after the 5th edition and 700 pages, well, maybe because things are changing, economic data changes, the economy changes, maybe it'd be better to put it in terms of some sort of a website that's a living website that changes. So tonight is the official launch of my website, the online guide to the Namibian economy. It's just economy.com.na. I want to very briefly take you around it because I think it's absolutely fantastic. Okay, well, you haven't seen what it has to offer yet. Just wait. So this is the homepage, and on the homepage we've got some fantastic pictures from some fantastic bits of the Namibian economy: the Benguela Gem, Gondwana, Hangana fishing industry, B2 Gold mine. And we've got the latest indicators up there. So the latest official forecast of GDP change this year, inflation, the repo rate, budget balance predicted in the budget, public debt, and private non-mining investment. Okay. And then what I do, because I believe in the public sharing of important documents on the economy. I've got here the latest public documents available on the economy. So anyone who's interested there, I've got the latest Bank of Namibia monetary policy statement, the minister's speech to the Mining Expo a couple of weeks ago, the president's speech to the Mining Expo, NDP 6, for those of you who like reading national development plans, you can just download it from my website and read away. So all the public documents are there because I believe in sharing this and getting it out there to as many people as possible. Then we get to the sort of more commercial side, which isn't commercial at all, actually, my latest publication. So everything I produce that's for public consumption, I do some private work, is also available there. And the latest four things, so I've got the latest quarterly economic review that I produced for the IPPR there. That one was about, I think it was about free higher education. The one before that was about the SWAPO Manifesto implementation plan. Before that, an analysis of the budget done for the EU, I think, there. And here's an article I did on the founding father, Sam Nujoma, and his role in the economy for a special supplement produced by the Namibian newspaper earlier in the year. So all this is available. You can sign up to my monthly update if you want, which just shares what's gone on the website, what documents are available. But that is not all, ladies and gentlemen. It's a lot more than that. Let me quickly take you through it. This is going to take me half an hour, but I just want to show you, look at this. We've got charts here that just give you all the indicators of the economy. Look at this. And it tells you, you just move your cursor along, it tells you the precise repo rate at precise day going back to, 2014 there. This is updated as repo rates change, the consumer price index, even non-performing loans. It's just amazing here what I've got. Vehicle sales, government finances. Look, you just put your cursor over it and lo and behold, 34.5% of GDP. There we are. You've got predicted expenditure in this year's budget. You've got the budget deficit there. Look at that. So these things are absolutely fantastic and they're kept up to date by me, no one else. Let me move on because that's not all either. About Namibia at a glance. This tells you about Namibia. Foreign investors might be interested in this. You probably all know it, but it's the basics about our country here, international rankings, election results, you name it. Our latest cabinet. So if you keep up with political goings on, there's all the cabinets since President Nandi Ndaitwah was inaugurated and all the changes that have taken place since then. To get to know the new people in charge, all the regulators in Namibia. My goodness, there are a lot of them. Here, pages and pages of regulators and who's heading them. Look at all those regulators. I mean, that is interesting, isn't it? Oh, I've got to the bottom of the page. Not only regulators, but also the public enterprises. Fantastic. We've got all the information here and you can go to their websites. You just click the hypertext there and it takes you to the website of the public enterprise. I'm struggling to keep up with some of them in terms of their CEOs at the moment. They seem to change by the week, but this website does try and keep up to date. So I do try and stay on top of things. Okay, and then we get to the sectors. So there is now something about each sector of the economy. So let me go to, I don't know, diamonds, for example. So here, beautiful picture of the Benguela gem. What a fantastic vessel. Global diamond production 24, just an outline of the legislation that covers the sector, something about NAMDEB, the NDTC site holders, everything, it's just the sector at a glance. You can just get it straight from the website. And I go through all the sectors there. Then I go into special issues. I've chosen oil and gas. Look at this, oil and gas. I'm saving you guys hours and hours of trying to find out who's drilling what, with whom, where. It's not straightforward, I can tell you that. But there they are, all the wells drilled since 1974, I think, goes back. That's not bad, is it? Green hydrogen. I'm not leaving out green hydrogen. There's a whole timeline there of all the things that have happened up to the time that the president inaugurated the Oshivela project near Randis. There we are, green hydrogen. Then I've chosen climate change as well. There's all our climate change documents that we submit to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and then we've got something on downstream petroleum. I put that in there because people need to understand how our petrol price is determined. Okay, I know I'm going on and on, but this really is it gets more exciting now. Look at this, resources. So under resources, you can look at my book, Guide to the Namibian Economy. Who here hasn't heard of my book? There we are, see? Everyone's heard of it. It's great. People are interested in economics. Look, and there it all is. You can flick it over page by page. You can print, there's a picture of yours truly. Look at this, beautifully laid out. There's even the sound of the pages flicking. So you can pretend you can just put it on at night as you go to bed and just flick those pages. But it's all there, and you can download sections of it or the whole of it if you really want to, if you've got enough paper in your printer. It's all there. You can, I don't know what this is. So you can switch the sound off if it gets too much. Okay, so there's all my publications. So everything I've produced is here. As I say, so I'm still busy uploading 30 years worth of research, I have to say. So it's not entirely comprehensive yet. But it's there. Here's some analysis I did for the EU ambassador at the end of last year. You can download it. Stuff I wrote on green hydrogen. Some things I did for IJG before the last elections. Anyway, it goes on and on. Everything I've done pretty much. And then, public documents. So here we are. These are all the public documents. Now let me just show you how powerful this is. Sorry, Graham, I'm going on here, but budget. Let's put in the budget. Look, budget statement 2025-26. I've got every budget statement here going back to independence, ladies and gentlemen. How many of you have such a collection at home? Not many, I'd wager. Who wants to look at the 1990 budget? I certainly do. It's absolutely fascinating. Oh, there's a lady here. Yeah, good. You're one of my kind of people. But it's all there. You know, let's have a look at, I don't know, the investor roadmap that was here. Investor roadmap. I don't know if any of you can remember that, but there it is from way back in 2006. All the reports are there. If you can't find it, contact me, but over time, I will make sure this is fully populated and you'll have 35 years of documents in as much as they exist and they're publicly available. I don't publish stuff that is confidential or secret, yeah? So there it is. And then last but not least, there is something about me here. There's a lovely picture of me at the oil and gas conference. But anyway, it tells you who's behind the thing. So often you go on websites and you don't know who the hell's behind it and what their agenda is. Well, my agenda is pretty simple. It's to distribute as much information on the Namibian economy as possible to whoever's interested in it. There's no charge here. It's kindly sponsored by someone I do work for. I do a monthly report for IJG. I'm now back with them for the 4th time since I worked with them in the 1990s. They're a great company to work for. They give me a lot of freedom to do economic work that I enjoy. Okay, that's more than enough. I think I've really whetted your appetite there for all the information on the Namibian economy. If you do happen to look at it and you find something you're not happy with or inaccurate or whatever, you know who to contact. It's only me behind this. There's no one else responsible. Well. Okay, you're still clapping, you're still awake. That's very nice. But I'll give you another half an hour to see whether you can maintain that. So I'm now going to start on the main presentation, but with more commercial breaks. Can you see that? Yeah. So I produce every quarter something called a Quarterly Economic Review for the IPPR. This has been going now since 2018, and it's thanks to the IPPR and the Hunt Seidel Foundation that I managed to do this, and it's great fun to write. It's even greater fun to read, but it provides you with the updated view of the Namibian economy, all the data, and then it also has a feature. So every quarter there's a feature. The last feature you see here was the issue of tertiary education. I looked at whether the president's promise to provide free education was realistic in a fiscal sense and what the issues were. I think that's very interesting. I have more to say about it in the presentation today. Then I looked at the SWAPO Manifesto Implementation Plan in the previous quarter, very interesting. I have more to say about that in my presentation. I looked at Namibia going nuclear in the previous one, and then I assessed President Geingobb's terms in office from an economic perspective. So those are just the last ones I've produced since I was talking to you last week. And it's all free of charge. It's available on the IPPR website. It's available on my website. I encourage you to take a look. Right. So now I'm going to cut the commercials. You see, I'm wearing my IPPR hat today. These are collector's items now, I think. They're almost like MAGA caps, aren't they, Graham? Make IPPR great again. I've got about 3 of these, and I keep them in different houses and different countries. But I'm going to take it off now because I'm getting quite warm. But that has no significant symbolic meaning. So I'm still very much wearing my IPPR hat. Okay, so let's go on then. Right. We're going to kick off, and I'll kick off by quoting someone I think is an extraordinary person, but he absolutely nailed it when it comes to economics. He is not a Namibian. I don't know how many of you recognize him, but this is Iron Mike Tyson, very famous boxer. And his most famous quote, he's got a few, his most famous quote is this: "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." That's no truer than in the field of economics. You can have the best laid plans, but when the circumstances move against you, you've got to have a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. And I'm going to come back to Mr. Tyson later on in my presentation, because I think this is very, very relevant for where we are as a country in Namibia. So this is my State of the Namibian Economy 2025. Let me quickly remind you, this is now the 4th State of the Namibian Economy. I started off in 2022 when green hydrogen was all the rage, and I called it Namibia's Great Leap Forward, and I had a picture of Mao's Great Leap Forward there, which was, of course, a complete disaster, as we all know. But that wasn't really what I was trying to say at the moment. I was trying to ask the question of why economic performance had been so poor in this country since 2016, so before COVID, way before COVID. And I came to my own answers. No one seemed to disagree with me, but Namibians are very polite, of course. But hopefully it sowed a few seeds of sort of thought in the audience. And then I highlighted at that stage there were 2 major developments on the horizon: oil and gas and green hydrogen. And that's why I called it the Great Leap Forward. These things, at that stage at least, had the potential to take this country forward in a way that's never happened since independence, okay? The next presentation was this fork in the road. I remember Dr. Itula was there, and I asked him a question, what this picture signified. And I think you were flummoxed, Doctor. But there's the fork in the road. It was because at that stage, a year on from the previous one, I think we had some big decisions to make as a country. We'd almost recovered from COVID, but policy was slow and confused in advance of these potentially huge foreign investments that were going to flow into the country. That was a challenge for us. And I wanted to make the point that the policies we design and implement in the next year or 2 will determine the future trajectory of the country. Okay, this was 2023. I could probably still say the same thing now, to be quite honest, but you'll find out later. And then there was last year's. Well, this was in advance of national elections last November. So this was in August 2024. And I asked the question, will it be the economy, stupid? Based on James Carville's "It's the economy, stupid," the Clinton strategist's view of the 1992, I think it was, US election. Of course, my good friend Christy Kulder here argues that there's no data to support the fact that Namibians vote on the basis of economic performance. But as an economist, I clearly ignore that and continue asking the question anyway, because I think it's an interesting question. But I think at the time I was trying to make these 3 points. Would economic performance, which had been poor, as I said, since 2016, would that affect the outcome of the national elections? The 2019 elections had already been quite important and unusual in Namibia because it was the first time that average incomes had actually fallen within a presidential term. And of course, the votes changed between 2014 and 2019. We saw tremendous change in the way Namibians voted in national elections. And yet again, you know, what else would you expect Robin Sherborne to say? I expressed concern over the investment environment in this country. So that was 2024. I will leave you to conclude yourselves whether you think economic performance affected the outcome of the last presidential and National Assembly elections. Okay, so here we are, State of the Namibian Economy 2025. And I'm going to do pretty much what I did last time with a few tweaks. I'm going to review the latest economic indicators. I'm going to review key events since the last presentation I gave. I'm going to review policy developments. I'm going to look more closely at oil and gas, green hydrogen, and diamonds this time around, because diamonds, I think, are in a very interesting situation. And I'm going to look ahead at the coming years. So I'm going to try and do all that in less than 40 slides. Hopefully you survive. Okay, let's look at growth first. So this is a chart of GDP growth since, I don't know, 2007 or something. The top chart is just annual growth. It's a percentage change. You can see growth almost evaporated after from 2016 onwards, and then it was hit badly. The big red bar is COVID, basically, and then the economy bounced back to where it was before COVID, and it's now, those grey bars are official forecast by the Bank of Namibia, so between 3 and 4% growth over the coming few years, okay? And then the chart on the bottom is just the quarterly version of that. The Namibia Statistics Agency produces quarterly GDP statistics too. Okay. So far, so good. But I want to make these following points. We've recovered from COVID with modest growth ahead. So we're not rocketing ahead. We're growing by 3 or 4% a year over the next few years. But we had the 2023 census results out at the end of last year, which weren't available at my last presentation, okay? And that suggested that our population is growing not by 1.4% a year, as we'd been led to believe by the previous census, but by 3% a year. Our population is growing by 3% a year. And that effectively means if your economy isn't growing by 3% a year as well, you're getting poorer on average, yeah? We're just talking average. We're not talking about distribution of that income, okay? So 3% must be a minimum for us if that's the way our population is growing. I'm a little bit skeptical about that population growth rate, I have to say, but that is what the data says, so I have to accept it. Since then, we've been reclassified from an upper middle income country to a lower middle income country by the World Bank. The World Bank has a classification scheme. It's low income, lower middle, upper middle, and high income. And it's based on a threshold GDP per capita, essentially in US dollars. And since 2008, we've been an upper middle income country because our growth hasn't kept pace with the population growth rate, and the new census statistics came out at the end of last year. Our GDP per capita went down, pushing us below the threshold of an upper middle income country to lower middle income country, okay? Now, I know some people have tried to spin this as a great thing for the country, but if you want my view, which is I think why you're here, you can't spin it as anything other than a setback for us. Not least because the founding father in 2004 set a vision for the country, the Vision 2030, which envisaged us being an industrialized high-income country by 2030. Now, at the time in 2004, that's 2030 seemed a long time in the future. So the founding father could really say whatever he wanted, to be honest. But 2030 is just around the corner now. It's only 5 years to go. Are we going to make it? We're moving in the wrong direction. That's tough. Okay, Bank of Namibia is forecasting growth at 3.5% this year. My own forecast is a little bit lower. Growth is being weighed down by SACU and by diamonds. I'll go into that a little bit later. But we're basically just keeping our head above water with growth rates at that level, yeah, because of our population growth. Okay, monetary policy. Well, I've got two charts here. The top chart is the inflation rate. The bottom chart is the repo rate. We don't directly target inflation ourselves as the Bank of Namibia here. We target the peg to the rand, and the South African Reserve Bank targets inflation. So we sort of follow them because we're part of the common monetary area. But we can deviate a little bit from what the South Africans set, and you can see there's some deviation there. We saw massive inflationary pressures impacting on us following COVID and also Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. That pushed up energy and food prices the world over. But South Africans have now got their inflation back to their target band of 3 to 6%. So that's good news. And they're saying, the South African Reserve Bank is saying that they're in the future aiming to target a single target. So not a band anymore, not 3 to 6%, but a 3% target, okay? So they're almost edging towards, I mean, the European Central Bank has a 2% target. So they're moving in that direction. And the Bank of Namibia seems to have gone along with that. So our repo rate since I last spoke has come down from 7.5% to 6.75%, almost as expected last year. So things very much as expected. But I think the 3% target in South Africa will have implications for us. It will probably mean interest rates don't go down as quickly as we'd originally hoped. It's going to take some interest rate policy there to get to the 3% and stay at the 3% target in South Africa. They haven't formally entrenched that yet. It's on its way. That's monetary policy. Fiscal policy, well, I've got a very detailed chart here of the budget. You can see it all on my website if you want. But the point is, this year's budget was very much a business as usual budget. I don't think the minister had time to do very much other than use what she'd inherited from Minister Shimi. She gave the budget on the 27th of March, which was shortly after cabinet had been appointed. So I would say very much business as usual. She made some statements in that budget speech, though, which I think are absolutely critical. So she said, this is the SWAPO manifesto first. They were going to pursue long-term fiscal sustainability through prudent fiscal management and ensuring sustainable budget deficits and public debt. This is the SWAPO manifesto, yeah? Front and center. This is one of the first statements in the manifesto. So it recognizes the importance of fiscal sustainability. And then the minister said, she went a bit further, in the interest of pursuing fiscal sustainability and debt stabilization, we aim to maintain a primary surplus. A primary surplus, as I'm sure you all know, is a situation where current receipts, tax revenue, are covering everything apart, all expenditures apart from debt repayment expenditures. Yeah, but that she's already put herself in a bit of a straitjacket there. She says there are limits. I'm going to limit myself to what we can go out and borrow, and therefore what we can spend. And she's also continued the reduction in non-mining corporate tax rate, she said in the budget, to 28% in 2026-27. So to all intents and purposes, a business as usual budget inherited from her previous predecessor, but that has consequences for what she will do over the coming 5 years. I'll come back to that later. Okay, I'm going to look into, before I do that, this is my favorite slide, of course. Those of you who've been to my previous presentations will know this. So now I'm looking at investment in the economy, okay? And I've got my two charts, which I've just updated since last year, but they tell the same story. So we've got the chart at the top, which just shows total fixed investment in the economy since 2013, I think. The blue is the private sector investment, the light blue is state-owned enterprise investment, and the black is government investment. It's not important that you see the precise details, but you can see we've been on a long downward trend up to COVID, since when fixed investment in the economy has increased. But just look at the overwhelming predominance of private sector investment. If we want to get the economy moving, we have to get private investment up. Yeah? We can do things with public investment, and that's very important, but if we're not moving private investment, then we're not really moving the dial. And these are all measured in constant prices in the first, so you can compare one year with another. So on the face of it, that first chart looks very positive. Aha, you'll say, we're on the way up. But Robin Sherborne says, not so fast. Look at the chart at the bottom. And the chart at the bottom basically divides private sector investment into total private sector fixed investment, which is the blue line. That's essentially what you see in the chart above. But this is expressed as a percentage of the size of the economy now, not in constant Namibian dollars. And then stripping out the oil and gas and the mining investment from that, you get the red line. So the red line is private sector, non-mining, non-oil and gas investment. And if you look at that line, it's been on a long-term downward trend for many, many years. Yeah? And 2024 was even worse than 2023. So that trend is still happening. So the question we have to ask is, why is the private sector investment outside of these highly capital-intensive sectors, why is it continuing to fall? Why is it so low? If we want to grow by 5 to 10% a year, we're going to have to be doubling our rate of private sector investment in this country. We're not going to grow by anything more than 3 or 4% if we're investing these levels of investment. Yeah? So investment is absolutely key. The fundamental truth, which no one can get around, is that if you want to grow tomorrow, you have to be investing today. Yeah? So we're not investing enough. Why? Underlines the importance of improving the investment climate. This is the message I'm taking from it. I'm not sure what other message other people are taking from it. And I'm worried that, hang on a minute, guys, Dutch disease is already starting to happen in this economy before we even reach first oil. the private sector is sort of possibly withering away, and we haven't even started producing oil yet. And that's the sort of classic definition of Dutch disease, that a resource like oil and gas can lead to the withering away of the other tradable parts of the economy. This is official data. So cause for concern. Okay, I'm moving on. So I want to take a slightly closer look at growth. I'll be very quick. So what I did yesterday, I got the NSA database and I looked at the composition of the economy. It's very small and detailed. The overall picture is quite clear though. The overall composition of the economy by sector in 1990, the year of independence, and of last year. And if you look at that and compare the 2 years, you find that, well, actually, there's been very little significant structural change in the economy over the 35 years. I could have done a much more detailed analysis with every year, but I think the overall story rings true, and it's a story that comes across in my book as well. So very little structural change. The same sectors contribute about the same proportion to overall economic activity as they did at independence. The one thing you might say is, but that blue sector is a lot smaller now than it was, and that's the government, producer of government services, it's called. So the government sector is smaller now than it was at independence, you might say. But I would say that's probably more of a statistical aberration. Yes, there was the national reconciliation and the change in the public sector after independence, so people had to be employed and the public sector expanded. But since then, you've had a process of commercialization, certainly in the 90s. So a lot of government departments, which would previously have been classified as producers of government services, have actually been scattered to, the telecom sector of the economy or the transport sector of the economy or something like that. So I would say that change in government is really a statistical thing rather than a big significant change in the structure of the economy. Okay, so that's the structure of the economy. Now I'm going to look at exports, and here the story is pretty much the same. Again, you don't need to look at the details of this. I'm happy to share it with you, but I looked at the exports of goods not services, in 1993. That's the first year for which the data is available from the Bank of Namibia, and last year's exports. And basically, we're still exporting the same products to the rest of the world as we were back then. The one big change is that we're now exporting a lot more cut and polished diamonds than we were in 1990. We weren't producing cut and polished diamonds then. So some of the diamonds we used to produce rough, we now export cut and polished. That's the one big change. Otherwise, we're still producing cattle, some high value crops, meat products, beer. It's pretty much the same products there. So our economic policies haven't managed to identify new products that we can sell to the rest of the world, which will have an impact on growth and incomes and employment here. And then we look at employment. I'm taking a closer look. I could spend an hour just looking at employment, but what I've done here is just charted all the unemployment rates since the population housing census of 1991. So that's the first time we looked at the issue of unemployment in independent Namibia. So I've put it all there, but you can see 2023, the labor force report came out and suggested we had an unemployment rate of 36%. But if you take account of all the people in what they termed the potential labor force, i.e. discouraged job seekers, people who had given up looking for jobs, if you included them in the statistics, then our unemployment rate was much closer to 55% than to 36%, yeah? And that's a bit of an indictment on our economic policy over the last 35 years. In other words, this is an issue that's becoming worse. So I think all these things are linked, and my thesis is as follows: an insufficiently attractive investment climate, foreign investors and local investors, our private sector isn't investing enough, is leading to low rates of private sector investment and FDI, which leads to low growth, limited structural change and export diversification, resulting in insufficient job creation. So that's my interpretation of the statistics. I boiled all that down into this one big central issue of our investment environment in this country, okay? You might not agree with that, but that's my thesis. Okay, let me move on. I haven't got to Mike Tyson yet. I will do. So I'm going to very quickly run through some of the key events that have taken place since I last gave this presentation in August 2024. And there are so many interesting things. I could have chosen so many things to talk about. I'm not going to talk about each of these ones, but I'll whiz through them very, very quickly because I think it's important that we recognize what's happened in the past year, and that's part of the value, I think, of such a presentation. So between 29th of August 24, when I gave the presentation, and today, basically. So I've put a table here, and I've tried to rank these things as good, bad, or hard to say. So we've had this announcement last September that we're going to get a second desalination plant at the coast. That's just an announcement. We've got another announcement that Chinese companies are going to build the largest solar PV plant in the country. I've put those under good. I think that's good. The High Rail project was paused in September last year. That's this essentially green hydrogen-powered locomotive project that was being pushed by a number of companies, including Namib. That was paused. And then we had President Mbumba at the UN General Assembly in September, sitting down with Elon Musk, who I think you all know, encouraging him to bring Starlink to Namibia. I remember the photo was quite an interesting one there. NAMCOR announces a restructuring on the 2nd of October. I don't know what's happened to that. Access Bank was granted a provisional banking license in October, and the minimum wage was announced at the middle of October then. So very important to the economy overall. Carry on. 24th of October, President Mbumba inaugurated the Daura's Green Hydrogen Village. That was a big event, but I'm not sure they were producing green hydrogen at the time. So it was a sort of soft inauguration, if you like. We were ranked 6th in Mo Ibrahim's African Governance Index. Yet again, we haven't moved from that ranking for a long time. And then we saw a political earthquake take place next door, the BDP losing power in Botswana. They have a different electoral system to ours, but after they've been in power since 1966, basically. So that was quite a shock and a surprise. We saw TIL, the handover at Damport, running the container port on a 25-year agreement. I think that's very positive. I'll put it down as positive. Then we saw Halliburton open facility in Namibia. We saw Statista rate Namibia's roads as the best in Africa, also very positive. We saw Baker Hughes, another oil and gas related firm, launch its the first mud plant in Walvis Bay. Again, I'd say that was a positive thing. So not many bads happening at the moment. We had elections on the 27th of November. I won't comment a lot on that, but I think the outcome has been accepted now, and we're in a whole new administration now. Then 28th of November, Starlink were ordered to cease in Namibia, and there are all sorts of issues there about Namibian ownership and things. So you can't use Starlink at the moment. Then we had in December, Cabinet approving an upstream local content policy. So this is a policy for the upstream oil and gas industry, and basically determining what local content they will be obliged or encouraged to purchase. So that's obviously a big issue for our local suppliers there. I said it hard to say because I haven't been through it, and I think it's being overtaken now by the latest events. I'll come on to it in a bit. 4th of December, well, this was actually my study, ambassador for the EU, but I think that was very interesting because for the first time, really, we looked at Namibia's trade patterns, and instead of just looking country by country, which is the way we normally do it, we grouped all the EU countries into one trading bloc because they do trade as a single market effectively with the rest of the world. And if you do that, you discover that the EU is actually our top export destination and our most diversified export destination, I have to say, and has been for the last 3 years. So very interesting. Climate fund managers announced their 24% stake in Hyphen in December. I put that as a good. Namib buying new locomotives in January, good. We had this incident at Namibia, definitely a bad. I'll go into that in a bit more detail later on when I talk about diamonds. So some bads creeping in. Then we had the labour force report by the NSA, which I've already mentioned. Well, I can certainly understand why they delayed the release of that report until after the elections. I put hard to say. I mean, it's useful to have that, but I would say if you're serious about economic policy, you need to undertake a labour force survey more than just once every 6 years. I'm sorry. We're not serious about these things. And I can possibly see why, looking at the results of that Labour Force report. Then I've put definite bad. We have President Trump being sworn in as US president and pretty quickly moves to freeze aid to Namibia, not just Namibia, to many other countries as well, the end of USAID and all sorts of other things. I think IPPR was very directly affected by that. I put that down as a definite bad. Then we had an announcement by Total that they would delay their FID, their final investment decision on the Venus project, until 2026 now. Before, we were all thinking 2025. This was the year that it was going to happen. Founding father Sam Nujoma passed away in February. Then later in the month, Anglo American reduces the carrying value of De Beers. So in other words, the value of De Beers, which is our 50% joint venture partner in Namdeb, the value was written down by 2.9 billion US dollars, I think. So De Beers is becoming less and less valuable as time goes on. Then we had our new president sworn in and the new cabinet appointed. And then very quickly after that, I think the Minister of Finance, Erika Shafuda, tabling the budget. I think that was done quite well. I think in the past we've had problems with budgets over transitions, but I think it's very good that she played it quite safe in that first budget. As I said, business as usual budget, and I don't mean that in any sort of derogatory way. I think that was the right way to play it. And then we carry on. 2nd of April, the Trump administration announces Liberation Day and imposes so-called reciprocal tariffs on all and sundry. It doesn't matter if you're a US ally or a US enemy. Some US enemies seem to get away scot-free, not mentioning any names. But that's already had potential impact on us here in Namibia and in Southern Africa. I don't know why I've put that as a good. That should be a bad. I'm not a covert MAGA supporter, I have to say. We had the president inaugurate this pioneering Oshivela green hydrogen project near Arandis. I definitely put that as a good. And then she announces free higher education on the 25th of April. I put hard to say, not because I'm against it, but because it depends how it's going to be done. I can say a bit more about that later. And then we had the CEO, Patrick Poyane of Total Energies, visiting the president here in Windhoek and having in-depth talks about the development of their Venus field. Very interesting. He made some interesting statements after that. Then we had the resignation of our first Minister of Agriculture then after being arrested. That's an unusual. I don't think that's happened in the history of post-independence Namibia. Graham can correct me. Then, 23rd of May, we have the president announcing a new upstream petroleum unit in the office of the president. In other words, she was essentially taking all the oil and gas related institutional apparatus from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, where it's traditionally been housed, into her office. Okay, and she's appointed two new advisors, Cornelia Schlunga and McLeod, to head this unit. I'll say a bit more later. And then we had, as a bad, on the 6th of June, Sinomine, the new owners of the Tsumeb smelter, announcing that they were halting production in Tsumeb. Definite bad. Okay, I'm getting to the end now. Good, 12th of June, China announces it will eliminate tariffs on 53 African countries. So seeing the US essentially moving out of being a trusted global trading partner for Africa, the Chinese have moved in. I think it's a welcome announcement. So whereas previously only low-income countries had tariff-free access to China, now all countries, including including upper middle income, which we're no longer part of course, lower middle income. So it didn't really affect us as much as it would have done before. Tariff-free. Of course, we all know, if you know anything about trade, you know tariffs is only a fraction of the story. It's the non-tariff barriers. It's all the rules and regulations you have to follow in order to do trade that are the real issues. And then we had the president announce that the NIPDB, the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, was going to move to international relations, as was trade. So Ministry of Trade and Industry is broken up in the new cabinet. I put that as a bad. I'll come to that a bit later on. Then on the 1st of July, a historic moment for our economy, we made our first shipment of goods under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And we exported 45 tons of salt from Walvis Bay to Nigeria. Historic moment. Then on the 9th of July, we had the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, turn up for a flying visit. It really was very, very quick. but clearly this was part of a 5-country visit by Modi, and India is, of course, a rising power in the world. I think it's the world's 5th largest economy at the moment. Clearly a recognition that Namibia is an important player. An important player in what? Well, possibly oil and gas in future, has been an important player. We've had significant Indian investors here, and of course the Indians play a really important role in our diamond cutting and polishing industry here. A lot of those companies are joint ventures with Indian companies. So very important. Then we saw the Namcor arrests by the ACC on the 11th of July. I don't really want to say that much about that. And then on the 5th of August, Minister of Industries, Mines and Energy announcing at the Mining Expo the 51% Namibian ownership requirement on mining ventures. And of course, that is anchored in NDP 6. But that came as a bit of a shock to the industry. I'll go into that a little bit later on. Okay, so certainly no shortage of interesting things happening over the past year. And I deliberately tried not to talk about Donald Trump as much as I could, because the guy seems to really enjoy public, almost for the sake of it.
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yep.
God. I spent too long on my website. This is where it gets interesting, I'm afraid. Review of policy environment. Okay. Okay, let's take a little break. Let me just ask the audience. I haven't seen many people asleep yet, but I do see some sleepy eyes. Okay, who read the Harambee Prosperity Plan 1? Put your hands up. Right. Steve Galloway, what was the most impressive thing? What do you think was the most important, target for HPP 1? And did government achieve it?
The answer is no.
No what? you didn't actually read it.
The second answer is no, didn't achieve it.
Okay.
It's hard to say what the most salient was, but the positive was that there were a whole lot of deliverables which were supposed to be measured, and I'm afraid that we missed most of the targets.
Okay. Well, I can see we've got an absolutely fantastic audience, because I wasn't expecting any answers to that. What about HPP 2? Anyone read HPP 2? Apart from Graham Hopwood, who's the only man to have read my book. Not many people. Okay, who read the SWAPO manifesto, this last election SWAPO manifesto? Okay, gentlemen at the front here. What was striking about that for you? What do you remember having read it? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting things in it, but a lot of pre-electoral promises, I would say.
Pre-election promises. Okay, well, that's not unusual in a manifesto, is it? Okay, you can't be more. Not many people seem to have read the manifesto. Hands up who's read the SWAPO manifesto implementation plan. Apart from Graham Hopwood here and Steve Galloway. Yes. Okay, what was your biggest, what were you most impressed by? Yes, you. Yes.
I don't know. I think the focus on green industrialization, but maybe
Okay.
I can't tell more.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for answering, yeah. Okay, look, what I'm taking from this is that governments and parties produce lots of long documents, but A, not many people read them, and B, not many people digest them. So maybe it doesn't matter too much what they put in these documents. And that people like me who spend an awful lot of their lives reading these long government documents, they're possibly taking them a little bit too seriously. You can tell me what you think. Okay, so we're going to move on now to policy, and I'm not going to repeat what I've said over the past 3 years, but I am going to look here. Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan. Okay, I'm saying here we have 3, because we've got the manifesto, we've got the implementation plan, and we've got the NDP 6. And the question is, which one should we take more seriously than which other one? Do they all say the same thing? Are they all written by the same people? I don't know. I have my doubts. So I've chosen a few areas. So, for example, oil and gas. Well, the manifesto on oil and gas said, well, we must try and increase the amount of Namibianization of the industry, but very general. Local content saying we must try and boost local content, very general. The implementation plan after the election then mentioned ownership again. An independent petroleum regulatory agency was there, and then introduced this at least 30% carry for the state of all oil and gas projects. So that wasn't in the manifesto, and now it's in the implementation plan. And then the NDP 6, well, suddenly that 30% figure, I think, disappears. Instead, we're getting 150 million barrels of oil equivalent by 2030, and we're getting 22,800 jobs by 2030. That's the commitment. Mining, well, the manifesto said we follow the minerals beneficiation strategy, which I personally hadn't heard of, but it was published in 2021. We reinvigorate Ippr, which was created in 2009 to be government stakeholder in the mining industry, and we reinvigorate the Minerals Development Fund, which is essentially long lain dormant. It's supposed to be a rotating fund. I think the origin, Steve, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was the CISMIN money we got in the 90s. So the idea was you create this Namibian fund under the control of Namibians that could invest in mining projects, and then the returns would come back into the fund and create a revolving fund, which you would then lend out again. Okay, the implementation plan didn't say much about mining, but it did mention ownership, but not very specifically. And then NDP 6 says, oh, we start at 51% Namibian ownership of the mining sector. This is of the mining sector in 2025, and we go up to 60% Namibian ownership by 2030. And on top of that, we go for 57% of our mineral exports are going to be processed exports, not raw exports. And we have the revitalized MDF. So they're not saying sort of the same things, really. Things vary. Free higher education, well, there wasn't a mention of that in the manifesto, interestingly, and I don't remember it being mentioned on the campaign trail at all. But then the president made the announcement after, I think it was April, wasn't it? I said, and we're going to dissolve NSFAF, which is probably a good idea, and we're going to offer free higher and vocational education. So I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I'm just saying it didn't appear in the manifesto. We're going to transform, under NDP 6, we're going to transform NSFAF, and we're going to raise the number of people in higher education from 20% to 50% by 2030. Okay? I don't know who's done the numbers for this. Fiscal policy, well, the manifesto emphasized fiscal sustainability, did mention the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The implementation plan just mentioned fiscal sustainability, and the NDP 6 doesn't really say much about the fiscal situation at all. The investment climate, my big hobby horse, well, the manifesto mentioned special economic zones. The implementation plan mentioned the need to pass the Investment Promotion and Facilitation Bill of 2021 as quickly as possible. This was a priority. Hadn't been mentioned in the manifesto and doesn't get mentioned in NDP 6. We have a small mention of the business environment, and then we have these private sector-led growth initiatives. I'm not quite sure what that is. Absolutely no mention of NIPDB in any of these documents. So it was clearly for the chop because it wasn't being mentioned. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that we have 3 potential plans for government over the next 5 years. They don't really talk to each other. I don't know if the same people were writing the document, but it seems that things change as the documents progresses. As the documents progress. NDP 6, well, that of course makes me feel quite old because the first thing I did when I arrived in Namibia in 1991 was produce not even NDP 1, but the Transitional National Development Plan, which came before it. So I know my national development plans, they're not easy to read, and I'm not sure how influential they are in terms of what actually government ends up doing. So we have 3 plans. What's government going to end up doing? It's hard to say. Yeah, so coming back. So I wrote a quarterly economic review for the first quarter of this year where I critiqued the SWAPO Manifesto Implementation Plan, and my conclusions were the basic economic strategy was flawed because it's based on the value addition of minerals. I don't think there's much potential there, and I'll come to that later. But what value to which minerals? That's the question I asked. Everything's couched in very vague language. Of course, we would like to add value to our minerals if it makes commercial sense. But does it? Focus on state projects. Everything was about the government doing this, the government doing that. You can understand it's a sort of manifesto, but you have the Air Namibias, the MECOs, the green schemes, and even nuclear energy, which is a very long-term undertaking, which I'm not opposed to per se, but I think that's something for the late 2030s. It's not going to affect us in the coming 5 years. Resurrecting Air Namibia, well, you know the old joke, how do you start with this? How do you earn a small fortune? You start with a large one and you set up an airline. You know, we've proved that. It took us 20 years to close Air Namibia down, and now we're opening it up again. Focus on public sector jobs. It was all about the public sector, as far as I could see. It wasn't really backed by research and analysis, as far as I could see. Certainly none of my research and analysis over 35 years seemed to make an impact on it. Hard to distinguish between genuinely new and existing initiatives. No emphasis on the business and investment environment, which to me is the key challenge we face here. There was mention of the NIPFA, but what's happened to NIEB? The Minerals Act now's got another mention in NDP6, but what's happened to the Namibia Equitable Economic Empowerment Bill, which in 2016 was put out there for consultation by the Prime Minister, which said every business in the country had to cede 25% of its equity to unnamed, previously disadvantaged Namibians. That seems to have gone up in a puff of smoke, along with NIPDB too. No emphasis on public enterprise reform. Well, I think we've seen that. The Ministry of Finance is no longer the Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises. I think that's a great shame. I think they were making progress. There was more progress to be made, but essentially we've gone right through the institutional setup to find ourselves, as the Hobbit would say, back at where we started, essentially. What's that all been for? We've had ministries of public enterprises. We've had all sorts of things there, and we're back at square one. Green hydrogen definitely downgraded in the implementation plan. I think there was 1 or 2 mentions of it, whereas a couple of years before, green hydrogen was a great future for this country, and there was talk of 600,000 jobs being created in green hydrogen by 2040. What happened to all that? Okay, I'm trying to speed up, Marta. Minerals beneficiation. Okay, I could give a whole lecture on this, and so could some people in the audience, but I'd like to try and nail this. I mean, it's not as if we've not looked at this over 35 years. A lot of people have looked at these issues and come to broadly similar conclusions, that there's not much in it. Diamonds, we do a bit of diamond cutting and polishing, that's true. I think we've gone pretty much as far as we can at the moment, but maybe there's some additional potential there, although diamonds are in trouble. I'll come to that in a bit. Uranium, well, we produce yellow cake, but are we really going to go further down and do conversion and enrichment? I don't think so. Only very few countries in the world do that. Gold, we produce a bit of gold. We're producing a bit more of gold. We might produce even more gold soon. But we're right next door to South Africa's Rand Gold Refinery. Are we going to compete head on with them? Do we have cheaper power, or what's our advantage there? How's that going to work? Our quantities are very small, hard to see it. Copper, well, we were smelting in Tsumeb, but we were essentially smelting dirty concentrates from the rest of the world and not our own copper, generally speaking, and exporting that. It was much more of an EPZ process. You can critique that, but I don't think we're going to be doing a lot of copper smelting in the next 5 years. Zinc, well, we had special high-grade zinc at Scorpion, that closed down. Lead, there's not much going on in lead. Tin, not much. Iron, maybe direct reduced iron at Oshivela, it's possible. Wouldn't rule that out. Lithium, nothing as far as I can see. Salt, some final products. I mentioned that salt export to Nigeria, but we do a few other things. Maybe there's potential there. Marble, we produce some semi-finished products. And cement, well, it's sort of, cement is cement, essentially. And then remember, a lot of our mines, or quite a number of them, according to the Chamber of Mines, are under care and maintenance at the moment. So these aren't profitable operations that are operating. They've basically been parked until markets turn. So I don't know, I've looked at it. Other well-known economists in the country have looked at it. Lots of people have looked at it, and they haven't come to different conclusions. So I don't know if you base your entire economic strategy on adding value to minerals, and you don't even have the energy to do it, because we're still importing energy from the rest of Southern Africa, remember, then how is that going to be the backbone of your economic strategy? I don't know. Okay, let me move on. Marta, I'm almost there. Oil, gas, green hydrogen, diamonds. Okay, I'm racing through, but I don't see anyone snoring yet. There are some people on their phones. Okay, I won't fire any questions at you, but you're all still looking pretty fresh, so I'll carry on. So let me start off with oil and gas. This is almost a repeat of what I said last year. I don't think I've changed my view. Basically, the door's closing on new oil and gas projects, or maybe it isn't. But this was a landmark IEA report in 2021, which said that if we want to hit our net zero by 2050 targets. We can't allow any new oil and gas projects to get off the ground. We've seen Rhino resources add to the successful well drilling. Last year we just had Shell, Total and Galp. So there's more oil out there. It's all around the Orange Basin as far as we can tell at the moment, but it's challenging. It's a long way offshore and it's a long way under the ocean. I mean, the Total Venus project is, I think, 270 kilometers offshore, and then it's 3 kilometers under the water, and then 3 kilometers under the seabed, 6 kilometers. That far out, I mean, this is remarkable. We are at the very frontier here. A lot of gas in the oil that we've discovered, certainly in the Venus and the Shell finds. BW Energy is going to start drilling again this year, so maybe the Kudu 1.3 trillion cubic feet will be expanded. But gas is an issue. I'll come to that in a minute. Oil can be exploited faster than gas, but I think gas generally perceived to have much more potential to create onshore jobs for Namibia. If you see what's happened in countries like Qatar, it's the onshore gas industry that really creates the jobs. Limited jobs from the oil project, but significant revenues to government. I think that's it in a nutshell. I'll come to that in a bit. Oil could be a blessing, but it's been a curse in many countries. So it's all about how we manage this oil and gas resource, okay? And now we're hearing that the FID, the final investment decision on Venus, certainly, and remember, Rhino have announced they want to be the first one to first oil, FO. But at the moment, it looks like Total Energies, they're talking about final investment decision now by 2026, not 2025. When I was giving the talk last year, it was 2025. Okay, this is the drilling record. There's a lot of drilling. There could be more drilling. There will be more drilling this year. But this is all Orange Basin drilling, basically. Very interesting. There was a lot of talk of transparency, a lot of warm words at the Namibian Oil and Gas Conference last year. But maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any of the Namibian champions, the Namibian players in these projects give any sort of presentation at all. So the Custos, the Corres, the Trago, you know, where were they? It would have been nice to hear from them. I'd like to know what value they're adding to these projects, what role they're playing, and who they are. Would be interesting. Rhino itself, you know, again, talk about transparency. I don't even know who owns Rhino. They're privately held. You know, they're not exactly open about who their backers are. Azul is different, obviously. Azul is BP and Italy's ENI. So very interesting. A lot of wells being drilled. Okay. But here we come to Mr. Tyson for the first time. Punch in the face. Shell writes down $400 million worth of exploration activity at the beginning of this year. Okay, that was a blow for Namibia. Not a fatal blow. And these things do happen in oil and gas. But I suppose what I'd like to ask there is, you know, just imagine if Namibia had had a 51% stake in this project. Namibia would have written off $200 million US. Do you know what that is in NAM dollars? That's a lot of money. That's 4 billion NAM dollars. That's a big chunk of our budget. Are we really going to be putting that sort of money down? I think we should be grateful that there are people out there willing to put that sort of money down at risk and willing to lose it. We're not in a position to lose that sort of money. Right, punch one. So a few words about oil and gas policy. Let me just bring you up to speed. We have this new upstream petroleum unit in the Office of the President. Clearly, the President has wanted to centralize the whole business of oil and gas. You know, that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. She's appointed 2 experts, but she's charged them with reviewing Namibia's current petroleum regulatory framework and proposing governance policies for the upstream petroleum sector. Okay, on the face of it, that seems sensible. In practice, I just asked 2 questions. You know, one is, what have we been doing since the beginning of 2022, if not this? And 2 is, how long is this going to take? These things have a tendency to take years, sometimes even decades in Namibia. I'm not sure the oil companies will hang around for that length of time. The Petroleum Commissioner, Magashino, is still in the Ministry of Industries, Mines and Energy, so that needs to be sort of tidied up, I think. That could take some time. NAMCOR is clearly in trouble in all sorts of ways. It's, I always joke that it's, you know, we have NAMCOR on the front page. When I go back to the UK, it's always Donald Trump on the front page of every newspaper. So at least we're spared that. We're talking about an oil refinery, at least 30% state carry, local content, 15%, a petroleum regulatory agency. We're talking about all these things and all these documents we've got, all these plans. I can only see this as delaying a final investment decision. How long is it going to take us to get up and running? I don't personally believe a local content policy is necessary. And remember, we have no gas master plan in place, and the projects are talking about gas reinjection. So basically, we've got a lot of oil and gas down there, okay? Now, each find is different, has a different quantity of oil, gas, and water. But remember, the gas is a resource that potentially could be sold. But the first projects will probably be using that gas to re-inject into the wells to push the oil out. Now, what longer-term impact that has in terms of making it harder then to commercially exploit the gas later down the road is, I think, a very important question. And without the gas master plan in place, pipes going everywhere, and how all these fields are going to link together, it's going to be very difficult for the operators to actually know how to exploit the resource optimally. So that's very important. I noticed there is a mention of the gas master plan by this November in NDP 6, I think, but I think that's unrealistic. I don't think we're going to have a gas master plan by then. So the whole business of gas, I think, is very important when we consider our oil and gas resource. Things have gone quiet on the Welwitschia Sovereign Wealth Fund. That was supposed to hold a lot of the revenues from the oil and gas industry for Namibia, for current use and future use. That seems to have gone quiet. EITI membership, that seems to have bitten the dust. I don't know, Graham, if you've got any updates, but I don't see any mention of that in any of these planning documents of government. I think that would be a big step and a big signal that we're serious about transparency. I'm extremely skeptical, I have to say, having studied our economy for 35 years. I can't tell you what's going on in the fishing industry. I can't tell you what's really going on in the diamond industry. I can't tell you what's going on in any industry in this economy because there's no transparency at all and certainly no data. So I don't see why oil and gas is going to be any different.